Good morning, everyone. Matt Smith back here with you. Week 1 SEC recap. Pretty wild day yesterday. SEC 13 games going back to Thursday night, went 11-2. Still got one more coming up on Monday night with Louisville and a Lane Kiffinless Ole Miss after he tested positive for COVID yesterday morning. So quick look at the games. Obviously the big one, Georgia-Clemson. That was beautiful. I mean, there were only 13 points, but kind of like the 2011 LSU-Alabama game, which was low scoring. I thought it was still a very well-played game defensively. Some bad offense here and there, but overall just two dominant defenses, overwhelming two offensive lines that just weren't up to par. Georgia obviously made the one huge play with the Christopher Smith interception return, and just a complete domination from that front seven, ridiculously athletic. DJ Ucla, I thought, started to feel, what they call ghost pressure, where there was no pressure truly coming, but he thought it was coming just based on what he had seen earlier. How he didn't know where it was coming from throughout the night. He was already going down before the defender was even on top of him, and that's bad when you're a quarterback, and he'll overcome that. But Georgia's going to do that to a lot of opposing offenses this year. Just a complete dominant performance. Those linebackers, the athleticism was off the charts with Adam Anderson, Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith, Big Jordan Davis, obviously plug in the middle. Secondary looks pretty good. Obviously, Smith making the play like he did. Really not a whole lot of separation at all from Ross, from Nada, from Ladson and that Clemson receiving core last night. So just a dominating performance from the Dogs. JT Daniels, the numbers were fine. Only had that one big mistake when he was intercepted. Was not returned for a touchdown like Georgia's, which was the saving grace for the Dogs in the 10-3 win. But I thought he understood that there wasn't going to be a whole lot there. When he needed to check it down, when he needed to throw the ball away, he did that. I don't think he felt that pressure that Ucla was feeling just coming from everywhere, not knowing exactly who's coming. I thought he managed the game well. 10 points, 7 on defense. Obviously not a great number on the stat sheet, but completion percentage was high. Yards per completion, of course, was only about 6, I think. Pretty low, obviously, by quarterback standards, but plenty to work on. He met the moment, and that's all he has to do when you have that defense that Georgia has this year. So just so impressive from Kirby Smart. As good of a performance I think we've seen from this Georgia defense under him. And that gave us some flashbacks to the 2011 Alabama unit that he coordinated. That, to me, is the best defense I've seen in the last 20, 30 years of major college football. So great win for the Dogs. Off the radar for a bit here with UAB, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Arkansas coming up. They go to Auburn. But again, as we've talked about all summer, this Georgia schedule really opens up after the Clemson game and heading into Florida in late October, probably our next really tough challenge. So good chance this team goes 12-0. I don't want to talk about CFP implications just yet. Obviously, there is a scenario now where Clemson could get boxed out by 2 SEC teams if both Alabama and Georgia do go undefeated. Now the Tigers have the head-to-head loss, but way too early to start thinking about that. ACC champion's been in the top 3, I think, the last 8 years now, going back to the end of the BCS. So run the table. Your schedule's manageable. No Carolina, no Miami, no Virginia Tech until the championship game. This should be smooth sailing for the Tigers, and I have a feeling if they do win their next 12, they'll be right back in the college football playoff for the 7th year in a row. Other big game, LSU UCLA. Boy, the domination at the line of scrimmage from the Bruins was pretty surprising. We saw the running game really play well last week against Hawaii, but for them to just whip the Tigers on both sides of the ball, LSU I think had 48, 51, something like that, 50 yards rushing for the game. Pathetic effort. It was Kayshon Boutte and nothing else on that offense. He caught all 3 touchdowns LSU scored. A couple plays here and there from the receiving core, but John Emery was out in the running game. Just nothing else going on that LSU offense besides Boutte, who's an absolute stud. So they'll develop some complementary receivers, but overall just a great performance from Chip Kelly in that UCLA running game. Made some big plays, broke some tackles. Derek Stingley, I don't know what he was doing on that last touchdown. Pathetic attempt at a tackle, and he's going to have to answer for that many times over next March and April going through the NFL draft process because he really did not go all out for that one. Tried to tackle high, just shove him out of bounds. Kyle Phelps broke through it, and that was the dagger in the hearts of the LSU fans. So good atmosphere, 2 great uniforms, perfect venue. That was a fun game to watch. And now the heat turns up again on Ed Orgeron. Again, we don't know what the number is for him in terms of what he needs to save his job. If it is 8-4, it's going to be tough. I mean, I think 8-4 is probably the ceiling right now, knowing they still have to play Alabama, Texas A&M, Florida, Ole Miss, Auburn. Tough schedule for the rest of the way. Kentucky as well is in there. So an 0-1 start. I figured 8-4 would probably be the ceiling. with a loss last night. I had an 8-4 with a win last night, so they got work to do. Again, we have no idea what the mood is inside the decision-making offices in Baton Rouge about what it'll take to get Orgeron another year, but certainly the heat has turned up because that was just not a good performance, particularly at the line of scrimmage. When you're playing a Pac-12 team and you're an SEC team, you need to win that battle, and they lost it many times over last night. Alabama, yeah, so they're pretty good at football this year, it looks like. Bryce Young stepped right in. Very good. A couple shaky throws early, but overall, very impressive performance. Met the moment again as well. And very few concerns going forward. That receiving core, Jameson Williams is the kind of the guy we were looking to, is who's going to step up to complement your number one in Mechie, your possession receiver in Slade Bolden. It looks like it's the Ohio State transfer Williams. And again, the transfer portal, the immediate eligibility, they tried to tell you it was going to increase parity in college football. It's not. It's only going to decrease parity because now the Blue Bloods, the superpowers, are going to be able to plug every hole on their roster. And for Alabama, wide receiver was not necessarily a flaw, but a bit of a concern at depth. When you lose DeMonte Smith, lose Jalen Waddle, lose all the guys they lost the previous year. It was a transition year. They get Jameson Williams. Great game for him yesterday to complement Mechie. And again, I don't see a flaw on that roster. Offensive line did fine. Defense was dominant. Miami only had about 50 yards by the time the game was 27-0 and already decided. Great performance from the Tide. Easy win next week, and they'll go to Florida in 2 weeks for a pretty interesting game there down in Gainesville. Other call-outs, Mississippi State, Louisiana Tech, Skip Holtz. My God, Louisiana Tech head coach. Nothing irritates me more than coaches who just try to settle for long to medium-range field goals. So Louisiana Tech was at the Mississippi State 30 with about 43 seconds left, had already blown a 34-14 lead in the fourth quarter. State was ahead 35-34. They had at least one timeout left. Could have gotten closer where you had maybe a 30-yard field goal. They just ran the ball 3 times. Mississippi State called one timeout. Louisiana Tech let the clock run down, called a timeout, set themselves for a 46-yard field goal on grass, on the road. That's a low percentage kick in college football, and they settled for that as the game-winning kick opportunity. It was short. Mississippi State won, and complete coaching malpractice by Skip Holtz, who in all has done a really good job there in his 7 or 8 years in Ruston, but pathetic. It just irritates me that these coaches make what they make, and they just put the games in the hands or the foot of a kicker all the time. You don't recruit kickers. You recruit quarterbacks and receivers and running backs. Put the ball in their hands. Give your kicker a short attempt to win the game. They did not do that. They deserve to lose. Pathetic performance. And on the Mississippi State side of things, nice comeback, but again, that offense is really starting to get figured out, it seems. They whipped LSU last year, but after that, everyone just went zone, tackled the catch, allow those 6-yard completions, and wait for the quarterback to make a mistake. And Mississippi State did that for 3 quarters. Louisiana Tech let them off the hook. Big win for Mike Leach. Now they have a really interesting game next week when NC State rolls into Starkville. Vanderbilt, 23-3 loss to East Tennessee State. It's worse than we even thought. Many people thought that could be a decent game against East Tennessee. It's not decent. Close, I guess, is the more proper term there. And they even had a chance to lose the game. But 23-3, completely non-competitive with a mid to bad FCS team in East Tennessee State. They play Georgia in 3 weeks. How are they going to score? Paint me a scenario where they even score a point in that game without some sort of stupid fumble or safety or penalty in the end. I don't know. Going to be a long year in Nashville. I think most of us were thinking 2-10, and now you wonder if they could even beat UConn in what really is their potentially only winnable game left. They do go to Colorado State next weekend, who also lost to an FCS team on Friday night, South Dakota State. So maybe a puncher's chance there, but oh boy, Derek Mason left that program in shambles. So it's going to be a while before we can judge Clark Lee, but after 1 week, that was not good on all accounts, losing by 20 to an FCS team at home. That's about it for the specific games. Florida's offense, as we saw, it's going to be different this year. 400 yards on the ground. Emory Jones, okay in the passing game. We'll see how he does against Alabama. I'm still a little concerned about that, but this offense is going to look a lot more like it did maybe in the late Mississippi State years for Dan Mullen with a quarterback like Nick Fitzgerald. The passing game of last year is no more. They're going to do their work on the ground. And with the quality of depth they have in the running game, I think that's the right call for the Gators this year. So nice win over FAU. Defense had 6 sacks. Usual Todd Grantham performance, but a lot more to learn when Alabama comes in a couple of weeks. Tennessee kind of meh on Thursday night against Bowling Green. Joe Milton is all over the place. That arm needs to really be reined in, or that offense is not going to click the way it needs to complement a pretty bad defense and keep Tennessee in some games this year. So, fun one against Pitt next week in Knoxville. Looking forward to watching that one. South Carolina, the Zeb Nolan story, crazy. The grad assistant turned player. I think he had 3 first-half touchdown passes, maybe 4. Forgot to jot that down. They rolled over Eastern Illinois. Who cares? Not a great team. We'll see how they do as the season progresses. Arkansas, KJ Jefferson left a little bit to be desired yesterday. Obviously, the running element of his game is pretty darn good and adds something interesting to that offense. So really looking forward to the Texas visit next week. I think Arkansas is always well coached. Had to rally from 17-7 down, but I expect that team to be dialed in to meet the moment, and it will take Texas to utilize their significant, not overwhelming, but significant talent gap over Arkansas to be able to go into Fayetteville, win that game. So as good of a game as there is, I think, next week in terms of an intrigue perspective when they resurrect that old Southwest Conference rivalry, Longhorns and Hogs, next Saturday night up in Fayetteville. A&M, kind of a slow start against Kent State. That's a pretty good MAC team. Better offense than defense, but the Aggies' defense played really well. Only 3 points allowed pre-garbage time. Leon O'Neal had the pick 6. He's a stud DB, all SEC caliber. Broke that game open. I think it was 13-3 early in the third quarter. 85-yard pick 6. That was the end of that. A&M's got such a soft early schedule. They'll roll through Colorado next week, and we'll probably check back in on them in late September against Arkansas. Kentucky passing game looked good. Big game with Missouri next week. We'll see if Will Levis can keep it up. But for 1 week, this offense does look like it's taken quite a big step forward in the passing game. Pretty low bar, of course, but pretty impressive day. But a very bad Louisiana on-road team. So a lot more to learn next week against Missouri. Tigers defense, not great against Central Michigan. 475 yards allowed. Again, that's a pretty decent MAC team as well. But you'd like to see that defense a bit more buttoned up. So it looks like the Tigers will be probably explosive, create sacks, turnovers, but allow a lot of big plays. Again, that's 1 week, and we'll learn a heck of a lot more next week in Lexington. SEC conference opener for the Tigers and the Wildcats next week. Auburn, Akron's terrible, 60-10. Bo Nix had more touchdowns than incompletions. Looked pretty comfortable in that new offense with Brian Harsin and Mike Bobo. Good start, but again, terrible opponent. And we'll check back on them in 2 weeks when they roll up to State College to face the Nittany Lions. Couple national thoughts. Pac-12, ACC, not good. Pac-12 North going 1-5, losing to 3 Group of 5 teams. Looks like another year of mediocrity in the Pac-12. The only team that won in the North Division was Oregon, and they needed to rally past Fresno State. Might have lost Kayvon Thibodeau for next week's game at Ohio State. So outside of the UCLA win, not a good day. USC looked okay, pulled away from San Jose State. That was one of my best bets at USC minus 14. They covered it easily, but overall, not a good performance. Some late touchdowns to really put that game out of reach, but kind of a sloppy performance again from Clay Helton's team. Arizona lost to BYU. Expected, but another loss. So 500 week 1 for the Pac-12. Could be a long year. Looks very mediocre once again. ACC bad as well. Bunch of G5 losses. Duke losing to Charlotte on Friday night. Georgia Tech losing to Northern Illinois. Very bad news for Georgia Tech. That schedule is brutal. And there's serious 1-11 potential with the Yellow Jackets this year. So, yikes. What else? Big Ten was fine. SEC was fine. Big 12 was decent. West Virginia, bad loss at Maryland. 4 turnovers cost them the game there. But Texas Tech beat Houston. Kansas State with a real nice win over Stanford, just pounding them on the ground. They're always a fun team to watch when they're doing their thing because you know what's coming and you can't stop it. So I always enjoy watching K-State. Good start to week 1 yesterday with the win over Stanford. That's about it, I guess. Week 2, a couple big games. Talked about Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Arkansas. Probably the biggest one nationally is Cyhawk, Iowa State. They did not play last year. That game was COVIDed out. In Ames, Iowa State, again, they play an FCS team. They always seem to struggle with them. 16-10 win over Northern Iowa yesterday. Got through it. But now Iowa comes calling. Should be a great game next week. A&M, as we talked about at Colorado, looks better on paper than it probably will be. In Missouri, Kentucky, the first SEC conference game of the year, should be fun. That's the week 1 recap. I'll be back later this week to preview week 2. Enjoy Notre Dame, Florida State tonight, Louisville, Ole Miss tomorrow, and we'll wrap up the week with that. And it's been a fun 6 days once Monday wraps up of the start of the season. So Thank you all for watching. Check out my videos. Follow me on Twitter at MattSmithCFB, and I'll talk to you soon.